In the early 20th century, Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha stood at the intersection of Europe's most powerful royal networks. Born into one of the most influential dynasties of the age, she married into the German princely house of Hohenlohe-Langenburg and raised her children amid collapsing empires, world war, and the end of old aristocratic certainties. Her children were not monarchs, but they were never ordinary. One became a German prince navigating 2 world wars and post-war reconstruction. One married into another major dynastic house. 2 lived long, largely private lives as unmarried princesses in a changing Europe. One lived only 2 days. This video follows, in strict chronological order, what happened to each of Princess Alexandra's children, from birth and upbringing to adult roles, marriages, descendants, and final legacy. Each life is told in full, without interruption, before moving on to the next. On 24 March 1897 at Langenburg Castle in Württemberg, Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha gave birth to her first child, a son, christened Gottfried Hermann Alfred Paul Maximilian Victor. The infant prince entered the world as the heir to one of Germany's mediatized noble houses, families that had once ruled as sovereigns but now held their titles under the German Empire's federal structure. Prince Gottfried's birth secured the succession of the Hohenlohe-Langenburg line. His father, Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, presided over extensive estates in northeastern Baden-Württemberg, while his mother brought the prestige of the Saxe Coburg dynasty that had provided monarchs to Britain, Belgium, Portugal, and Bulgaria. The child represented the continuation of a house that traced its origins to the medieval Holy Roman Empire. The timing of Gottfried's birth coincided with the height of Imperial Germany's confidence. Kaiser Wilhelm II ruled from Berlin, the German princes maintained their ceremonial courts, and European aristocracy moved freely across the continent's interconnected royal networks. For a firstborn son of a princely house, the future appeared predictable: estate management, military service, and dynastic marriage. Prince Gottfried's early years unfolded within the structured environment of Langenburg Castle. The massive Renaissance fortress, perched above the Jagst River, housed one of Württemberg's most established noble courts. His upbringing followed the patterns established for German princely heirs: multilingual education, physical training, and gradual introduction to the responsibilities of estate oversight. The household maintained the protocols of a sovereign court despite the family's mediatized status. Gottfried learned German, English, and French from private tutors, while his education emphasized history, geography, and the administrative skills required for managing large rural properties. His mother's Coburg connections ensured exposure to broader European aristocratic society through regular correspondence and occasional visits from relatives across the continent. The prince's childhood occurred during a period of relative stability for the German nobility. The federal structure of the German Empire preserved many traditional privileges for the mediatized houses, allowing families like the Hohenlohe-Langenburgs to maintain their regional influence while participating in the larger imperial system. This environment shaped Gottfried's early understanding of his future role as both a regional leader and a participant in Germany's aristocratic hierarchy. As Prince Gottfried approached adolescence, his education intensified to prepare him for eventual leadership of the house. Unlike royal heirs destined for thrones, mediatized princes required training in practical estate management, regional administration, and the delicate navigation of imperial bureaucracy. His tutors emphasized economics, law, and agricultural management alongside the classical education befitting his rank. The prince's formation coincided with growing tensions across Europe. The naval race between Germany and Britain, imperial rivalries in Africa and Asia, and increasing nationalism in the Balkans created an atmosphere of uncertainty that contrasted with the confident assumptions of his early childhood. These developments began to raise questions about the stability of the aristocratic order that had defined European politics for centuries. By 1914, Gottfried had reached 17 years of age. His education had progressed to include regular participation in estate administration and preparation for university studies. The outbreak of World War I in August 1914 would fundamentally alter these plans and transform the context in which the young prince would assume his hereditary responsibilities. In 1915, at age 18, Prince Gottfried enlisted in the German army as a volunteer officer. His decision reflected both personal patriotism and the expectation that German nobles would serve the fatherland during the national crisis. He received a commission appropriate to his social rank and joined the officer corps that drew heavily from aristocratic families across the German states. The prince's military service exposed him to the realities of modern warfare that differed dramatically from the chivalric ideals that had shaped his upbringing. The technological nature of World War I, with its artillery barrages, poison gas, and machine gun combat, represented a fundamental break from traditional concepts of noble military leadership. Officers from princely families found themselves managing the complexities of trench warfare rather than leading cavalry charges. Gottfried's wartime experience proved formative in ways that extended beyond military training. He witnessed the gradual erosion of the imperial system that had provided the framework for his family's position. The war's enormous human and economic costs began to undermine popular support for the monarchy and aristocracy, while the practical demands of total war forced changes in traditional social relationships. The conflict's conclusion in November 1918 brought revolutionary upheaval that would permanently alter the context of German aristocratic life. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated and fled to the Netherlands, while revolutionary councils briefly seized control of major cities across Germany. For young nobles like Prince Gottfried, these events marked the end of the world they had been trained to inherit. The collapse of the German Empire forced Prince Gottfried to reconsider his future role and preparation. With the monarchy abolished and the new Weimar Republic establishing democratic governance, the traditional path from military service to estate management required substantial modification. The prince enrolled in university studies focused on economics and administration, recognizing that the changed political environment demanded new skills. Gottfried studied at the University of Heidelberg, where he encountered academic approaches to economics and public administration that had previously been outside the scope of aristocratic education. The university environment exposed him to middle-class students and professors whose perspectives differed significantly from the court-based worldview of his upbringing. This experience proved crucial in developing the adaptability that would characterize his later career. The prince's studies occurred during the Weimar Republic's early years, when Germany struggled with political instability, economic crisis, and social upheaval. The hyperinflation of 1923 devastated many aristocratic fortunes, while political violence from both left and right threatened the new democratic system. These conditions reinforced the necessity of developing practical skills rather than relying solely on traditional noble privilege. Upon completing his university education, Prince Gottfried returned to Langenburg with a substantially different understanding of his future role. Rather than presiding over a semi-sovereign principality, he would need to function as a private landowner and community leader within a democratic state that had little use for aristocratic tradition. Prince Gottfried succeeded his father as 8th Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, following Ernst II's death in 1950. However, the transformation of Germany's political system had fundamentally altered the meaning of this inheritance. The title carried no sovereign authority, no official recognition, and no guaranteed social deference from the surrounding population. The new Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg inherited substantial property holdings, including Langenburg Castle and surrounding agricultural estates. Managing these assets required skills that combined traditional estate administration with modern business practices. The family's survival depended on adapting to post-imperial economic conditions while maintaining enough resources to preserve the physical heritage of the house. Gottfried's succession occurred during the Weimar Republic's most stable period, when democratic institutions had achieved some legitimacy and economic conditions had temporarily improved. This environment allowed the former princely families to establish new roles as private citizens while maintaining their historical identities. The challenge lay in finding relevance without political power and purpose beyond mere preservation of tradition. The prince's approach to leadership emphasized community service and regional development rather than attempts to restore past privileges. This strategy proved essential for maintaining local respect and ensuring the family's continued presence in the Langenburg area. His success in this adaptation would be tested by the political upheavals that lay ahead. On 15 April 1931, Prince Gottfried married Princess Margarita of Greece and Denmark in a ceremony that demonstrated both the persistence and the transformation of European royal networks. The bride, born in 1905, was the daughter of Prince Andrew of Greece and Princess Alice of Battenberg, connecting the Hohenlohe-Langenburg house to the Greek royal family and, through her mother, to British royalty. Princess Margarita's background reflected the complex dislocations affecting European royalty during the interwar period. Her father's family had been repeatedly exiled from Greece due to political instability, while her mother's German connections had created difficulties during World War I. The marriage represented an alliance between two houses that had experienced the collapse of their traditional political contexts. The wedding took place at a modest scale compared to pre-war royal celebrations. The couple's ceremony occurred in Germany during the Depression, when economic constraints and political uncertainty discouraged elaborate displays of aristocratic privilege. The event nevertheless attracted representatives from royal families across Europe, demonstrating the continued social connections within this displaced community. The marriage aligned two strategies for aristocratic survival in the 20th century. Prince Gottfried's focus on estate management and local leadership combined with Princess Margarita's family's experience in adapting to political exile and social change. Their union represented both dynastic continuity and practical adaptation to new circumstances. Prince Gottfried and Princess Margarita produced 6 children between 1932 and 1944, ensuring the continuation of the Hohenlohe-Langenburg line. Their offspring included Prince Kraft, born in 1935, who would eventually succeed as 9th Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, and Princess Beatrix, born in 1936, who would maintain the family's royal connections through her own marriage and descendants. The children's upbringing occurred during the Nazi period and World War II, when traditional aristocratic education had to accommodate the demands and restrictions of totalitarian government. The family's survival strategy emphasized discretion and adaptation while maintaining their historical identity. The children learned to navigate between their aristocratic heritage and the political realities of Nazi Germany. The prince's descendants would carry the Hohenlohe-Langenburg name into the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Their lives demonstrated the successful transformation of a mediatized noble house into a modern aristocratic family that maintained its traditions while functioning within democratic society. Several children established international connections through marriage and career choices that reflected the globalization of elite society. The family's reproductive success contrasted with many European royal houses that struggled to maintain viable succession in the changed political environment. Prince Gottfried's numerous descendants ensured that the Hohenlohe-Langenburg tradition would continue, despite the disappearance of the political system that had originally sustained it. During the Nazi period, Prince Gottfried faced the complex challenge of preserving his family and estate while avoiding compromising political entanglements. The Nazi regime's attitude toward the traditional nobility remained ambiguous, occasionally celebrating aristocratic tradition while simultaneously promoting new elites based on party loyalty and racial ideology. The prince's position required careful navigation between maintaining local influence and avoiding actions that might attract unwanted attention from party authorities. His strategy emphasized estate management and local community leadership while avoiding high-profile political positions that might create conflicts with Nazi ideology. This approach proved essential for protecting both his family and his property during the 12 years of Nazi rule. The family's British connections through Princess Margarita created additional complications during the war years. Her relatives included Lord Louis Mountbatten and other prominent figures in the British military establishment, relationships that required discretion during the period when Germany and Britain were at war. The prince managed these challenges through careful attention to protocol and avoidance of provocative actions. World War II's conclusion in 1945 brought new challenges as Germany underwent occupation, denazification, and eventual division. The Hohenlohe-Langenburg estates lay within the American occupation zone, which provided more favorable conditions for aristocratic survival than might have occurred under Soviet occupation. The family's wartime discretion proved valuable in avoiding post-war persecution. Following Germany's defeat, Prince Gottfried received appointment as provisional district administrator for the Schwäbisch Hall area under American military government. This position represented both recognition of his local influence and the occupying authorities' need for experienced administrators to manage the transition from Nazi rule to democratic government. The prince's appointment demonstrated successful adaptation to the post-war order. Rather than attempting to restore past privileges, he accepted a bureaucratic role within the new democratic system. His performance in this position helped establish legitimacy for his continued regional leadership while contributing to the reconstruction of civil administration in southwestern Germany. Prince Gottfried's public service extended beyond formal administrative roles to include extensive involvement in church and charitable organizations. He served on numerous boards and committees that addressed community needs and regional development. This civic engagement provided an alternative form of leadership that drew on aristocratic traditions of paternalistic responsibility while operating within democratic institutions. The prince's post-war career illustrated one successful model for aristocratic survival in 20th century Europe. By emphasizing service rather than privilege, competence rather than birthright, and community benefit rather than family aggrandizement, he maintained local respect and influence while accommodating fundamental political change. Prince Gottfried spent his final decades at Langenburg Castle, where he continued to manage family estates and participate in regional affairs. His later years coincided with the German economic miracle and the Federal Republic's emergence as a major European power. The contrast between his early memories of imperial Germany and the reality of democratic prosperity illustrated the dramatic transformations that had occurred during his lifetime. The prince maintained correspondence with royal relatives across Europe, preserving connections that had survived 2 world wars and multiple political upheavals. These relationships provided continuity with the aristocratic past while adapting to the changed circumstances of European royalty in the democratic age. His role became increasingly ceremonial and social rather than political or administrative. Prince Gottfried died on 11th May 1960 at Langenburg Castle at age 63. His death marked the end of a career that had successfully navigated the transition from imperial privilege to democratic citizenship. Local newspapers noted his contributions to regional administration and community development, emphasizing his adaptation to post-war conditions rather than his aristocratic heritage. The prince's funeral attracted representatives from German noble families and European royalty, demonstrating the continued social cohesion of this displaced elite. The ceremony combined traditional aristocratic protocol with acknowledgement of his public service career, reflecting the synthesis of past and present that had characterized his life. Prince Gottfried's historical significance lies in his successful adaptation of aristocratic tradition to democratic conditions. His career demonstrated that European nobility could maintain relevance and respect through community service and competent administration rather than political privilege or social deference. This model influenced other noble families attempting similar transitions. The prince's legacy continued through his descendants, who pursued various careers in business, military service, and public administration while maintaining the Hohenlohe-Langenburg family tradition. His success in preserving both the family estates and its social position provided a foundation for continued aristocratic identity within modern German society. Prince Gottfried represented the transformation of European aristocracy from a governing elite to a cultural and social institution. His life illustrated both the possibilities and the limitations of aristocratic survival in the democratic age, showing how adaptability and service could substitute for traditional forms of power and authority. The prince's career bridged the gap between Imperial Germany and the Federal Republic, demonstrating personal and institutional continuity across one of European history's most dramatic periods of political change. His example influenced subsequent generations of European nobility seeking to maintain their traditions while contributing to democratic society. Princess Marie Melita of Hohenlohe-Langenburg was born on 18 January 1899 at Langenburg Castle, the second child and eldest daughter of Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha and Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Her birth occurred during the confident final years of the German Empire, when aristocratic families could still assume that traditional patterns of marriage and social organization would continue indefinitely. The princess received a name that honored both sides of her family heritage. Marie reflected German royal tradition, while Melita recalled her maternal grandmother's connections to various European courts. Her position as the eldest daughter created specific expectations regarding her future role as a liaison between her birth family and whatever house she might eventually join through marriage. Princess Marie Melita's early childhood unfolded within the same structured environment that shaped her older brother's development. The household at Langenburg maintained traditional protocols while preparing the children for their respective futures. For daughters of princely houses, this preparation emphasized languages, court etiquette, domestic management, and the social skills necessary for successful dynastic marriages. The princess's education followed established patterns for daughters of mediatized German nobility. Private tutors provided instruction in modern languages, including French and English, which were essential for communication within the international royal community. Her curriculum included history, geography, literature, and the fine arts, subjects considered appropriate for a young woman of her station. Unlike her brother, whose education increasingly emphasized practical skills and administrative training, Princess Marie Melita's upbringing focused on preparation for her future role as a wife and mother within aristocratic society. This education included household management, social entertaining, and the complex protocols that governed interactions between royal families. The assumption throughout her youth was that marriage would define her adult identity and social position. The princess's formative years coincided with growing tensions across Europe that would eventually culminate in World War I. However, her sheltered upbringing within the aristocratic bubble initially protected her from awareness of these broader political developments. Her world remained focused on family relationships, court society, and the expectation that she would eventually make a suitable dynastic marriage. Princess Marie Melita married Wilhelm Friedrich, Duke of Schleswig-Holstein, in a ceremony that represented both dynastic strategy and personal compatibility. The match connected the Hohenlohe-Langenburg house to one of Germany's most historically significant noble families, whose claims to Schleswig-Holstein had played a major role in 19th century European diplomacy. The Duke of Schleswig-Holstein brought impressive genealogical credentials to the marriage. His family descended from the royal houses of Denmark and Prussia, creating connections that enhanced the prestige of both houses. The marriage also represented a practical alliance between two families navigating the changed circumstances of German nobility in the post-war era. The wedding ceremony occurred during the Weimar period, when German aristocratic families were adjusting to their new status as private citizens rather than members of a governing elite. The celebration reflected this changed reality through its more modest scale compared to pre-war royal weddings. Nevertheless, the event attracted representatives from noble families across Europe, demonstrating the continued social cohesion of the displaced aristocratic community. The marriage proved successful both dynastically and personally, producing children who would carry forward both family traditions into the later 20th century. Princess Marie Melita's transition from Hohenlohe-Langenburg to Schleswig-Holstein illustrated the continued importance of marriage as a mechanism for maintaining aristocratic identity and expanding family networks, despite the loss of political relevance. As Duchess of Schleswig-Holstein, Princess Marie Melita established a household that combined traditions from both family backgrounds while adapting to the realities of aristocratic life in 20th century Germany. Her domestic arrangements reflected the careful balance required to maintain aristocratic standards during a period when traditional sources of noble income had been disrupted by war and political change. The Duchess's children received educations that prepared them for lives as private citizens rather than members of a governing elite. This shift reflected the broader transformation of European aristocracy from political leadership to cultural and social prominence. The family maintained its historical identity while acknowledging that future generations would need practical skills and professional training. Princess Marie Melita's household management demonstrated the adaptation strategies employed by aristocratic families during this transitional period. The family preserved ceremonial aspects of noble life while reducing household size and expense to match reduced circumstances. This approach allowed maintenance of aristocratic identity without the financial strain that bankrupted many noble families during the 20th century. The Duchess's role within the Schleswig-Holstein house emphasized family preservation and social continuity rather than political ambition or public prominence. Her success in this domestic sphere contributed to the family's survival through the challenging decades of the mid-20th century, when many European noble houses faced extinction due to war, revolution, and economic disruption. Princess Marie Melita's later years spanned the period of German reconstruction following World War II, when the Federal Republic emerged as a prosperous democracy. Her experience illustrated the successful adaptation of German aristocracy to the post-war order, emphasizing cultural preservation and social contribution rather than attempts to restore political privilege. The Duchess maintained connections with royal relatives across Europe while focusing primarily on family responsibilities and local community involvement. Her correspondence and social activities helped preserve the international network of relationships that had characterized European aristocracy before the great disruptions of the 20th century. These connections provided continuity across the dramatic political changes of her lifetime. Princess Marie Melita died in 1967, having witnessed the transformation of European aristocracy from a governing elite to a cultural institution. Her life spanned the period from imperial confidence through World War, revolution, and democratic reconstruction. Her successful navigation of these changes demonstrated the possibilities for aristocratic survival through adaptation and discretion. The Duchess's death marked the end of a life that had successfully bridged the gap between traditional aristocratic society and modern democratic conditions. Her legacy continued through her descendants, who maintained family traditions while pursuing various careers and contributing to contemporary German society. Her example influenced other aristocratic families seeking to preserve their heritage while accommodating political and social change. Princess Alexandra Beatrice Leopoldine of Hohenlohe-Langenburg was born on 2 April 1901 at Langenburg Castle, the third child and second daughter of Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha and Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Her birth occurred during the final years of the Victorian era, when European aristocracy maintained its traditional patterns while remaining largely unaware of the approaching disruptions that would transform their world. The princess received names that reflected multiple strands of her family heritage. Alexandra honored her mother, while Beatrice recalled connections to British royalty through the Saxe Coburg lineage. Leopoldine referenced the Belgian branch of the Coburg family, demonstrating the international scope of aristocratic naming conventions that emphasized dynastic relationships across national boundaries. Her position as a second daughter within the family created specific expectations regarding her future role and opportunities. Unlike the heir or the eldest daughter, whose paths were relatively defined, Princess Alexandra Beatrice faced greater uncertainty about her eventual position within aristocratic society. This ambiguity would prove characteristic of her entire life, as she navigated between family obligations and personal autonomy. Princess Alexandra Beatrice's upbringing occurred during the final decade of Imperial Germany, when aristocratic families could still maintain traditional assumptions about their future roles and social position. Her education followed established patterns for daughters of princely houses, emphasizing languages, cultural accomplishments, and the social skills considered essential for aristocratic women. The princess's childhood education included French, English, and German, reflecting the multilingual requirements of European aristocratic society. Her tutors provided instruction in history, literature, geography, and the fine arts, subjects that were considered appropriate for young women of her background. This education was designed to prepare her for a life of refined leisure rather than professional employment or public responsibility. Her formative years coincided with growing political tensions across Europe, but the aristocratic environment at Langenburg initially shielded her from awareness of these broader developments. The household maintained its traditional routines and expectations, assuming that the established social order would continue indefinitely. This assumption would prove tragically mistaken as World War I approached. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 occurred when Princess Alexandra Beatrice was 13 years old, an age when the disruption of normal aristocratic life patterns would have significant impact on her development and future expectations. The war marked the beginning of political and social changes that would fundamentally alter the context for aristocratic life and the options available to young women of her background. Princess Alexandra Beatrice reached adulthood during the period of revolutionary upheaval that followed Germany's defeat in World War I. The collapse of the imperial system and the establishment of the Weimar Republic created an environment of uncertainty that particularly affected unmarried daughters of aristocratic families who lacked the defined roles that marriage or inheritance might provide. The princess made the decision not to marry, a choice that reflected both personal preference and the changed circumstances facing European aristocracy during the interwar period. The traditional pattern of dynastic marriages had become more difficult to arrange as royal houses lost political relevance and economic resources. Many aristocratic women of her generation faced similar choices between unsatisfactory marriage prospects and spinsterhood. Princess Alexandra Beatrice's unmarried status meant that she remained within her family's household rather than establishing an independent position through marriage. This arrangement was common among aristocratic families during the 20th century, when economic constraints and political changes made it difficult to maintain multiple separate establishments. Her presence provided support for family activities while requiring financial provision from family resources. The princess's adult life was largely private, without significant public responsibilities or professional employment. This pattern reflected both personal inclination and the limited opportunities available to unmarried aristocratic women during the mid-20th century. Her existence was comfortable, but circumscribed, defined more by family relationships than by independent achievement or public recognition. As an unmarried daughter, Princess Alexandra Beatrice maintained close relationships with her siblings and participated in family activities throughout her adult life. Her position allowed her to serve as a supportive presence for various family enterprises while maintaining her own autonomy within the household structure at Langenburg. The princess's relationship with her married siblings provided vicarious participation in the broader aristocratic community through their connections and correspondence. She maintained awareness of developments within European royal circles while avoiding the responsibilities and constraints that marriage would have imposed. This arrangement offered both advantages and limitations for personal fulfillment. Princess Alexandra Beatrice's presence within the family provided continuity and stability during periods of political and social upheaval. Her unmarried status made her available for various family needs, including care for elderly relatives and support during times of crisis. This role, while traditional, proved valuable for maintaining family cohesion during challenging decades. The princess's relationship to her nephews and nieces provided another avenue for participation in family life and continuation of family traditions. Her position as an aunt allowed her to influence younger generations while maintaining her independence from the direct responsibilities of motherhood and household management that marriage would have entailed. Princess Alexandra Beatrice died in 1963 at age 62, having lived through the complete transformation of European aristocratic society from imperial privilege to democratic adaptation. Her death occurred during the period when the Federal Republic of Germany had achieved prosperity and stability, providing a stark contrast to the uncertain conditions that had characterized much of her adult life. The princess's historical footprint remained largely private, recorded primarily through genealogical documentation and family correspondence, rather than public achievement or recognition. Her life represented a common pattern among aristocratic women of her generation, who maintained traditional lifestyles while adapting to fundamentally changed political and social circumstances. Princess Alexandra Beatrice's legacy lay primarily in her contribution to family stability and continuity during a period of dramatic political upheaval. Her presence helped maintain the Hohenlohe-Langenburg household through challenging decades when many aristocratic families faced complete disruption or dissolution. This stabilizing role, while not publicly visible, proved essential for family survival. The princess's life illustrated both the constraints and the possibilities available to unmarried aristocratic women during the 20th century. Her choice of spinsterhood over unsatisfactory marriage prospects demonstrated personal agency within traditional social structures, while her continued residence within the family household reflected the economic and social limitations that circumscribed such independence. Princess Irma Helene of Hohenlohe-Langenburg was born on the 4th of July 1902 at Langenburg Castle, the fourth child and third daughter of Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha and Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Her birth occurred during the final years of imperial confidence in Europe, when aristocratic families maintained traditional expectations about their children's futures despite growing political tensions across the continent. The princesses' names reflected German aristocratic tradition, with Irma representing a more contemporary choice while Helene honored classical and royal precedents. Her position as a younger daughter within the family created different expectations compared to her older siblings, with greater flexibility regarding her future path, but also less defined prospects for marriage or independent establishment. Princess Irma Helene's birth coincided with the period when European aristocracy had reached its maximum geographical extent and political influence. Royal families governed across the continent from Britain to Russia, while mediatized houses like the Hohenlohe-Langenburgs maintained regional influence within the German imperial system. This environment shaped early assumptions about her future role and opportunities. The princess's childhood and adolescence spanned the period from late imperial confidence through World War I and into the revolutionary upheaval that established the Weimar Republic. These dramatic political changes fundamentally altered the context for aristocratic life and created uncertainty about traditional patterns of marriage and social organization. Princess Irma Helene received the standard education provided to daughters of German princely houses, emphasizing languages, cultural accomplishments, and social skills. However, her formative years occurred during a period when these traditional preparations were becoming increasingly irrelevant to the realities of 20th century life. The collapse of the imperial system eliminated many of the social structures that had provided meaning and purpose for aristocratic women. The princess reached adulthood during the 1920s, when the Weimar Republic struggled with political instability, economic crisis, and social transformation. The hyperinflation of 1923 devastated many aristocratic fortunes, while political violence from both extremes threatened the new democratic order. These conditions created an environment where traditional aristocratic life patterns became increasingly difficult to maintain. The rise of the Nazi movement during the early 1930s created additional complications for aristocratic families like the Hohenlohe-Langenburgs. The regime's ambiguous attitude toward traditional nobility, combined with its totalitarian control over social and political life, forced adjustments in lifestyle and public behavior that affected all family members regardless of their individual political views or activities. Princess Irma Helene made the decision never to marry, joining her sister Alexandra Beatrice in choosing spinsterhood over the uncertain prospects available for dynastic marriages during the interwar period. This choice reflected both personal preference and the practical difficulties facing aristocratic women whose traditional social world had been disrupted by political and economic upheaval. The princess's unmarried status meant that she remained within the family household at Langenburg throughout her adult life. This arrangement provided economic security and social position while allowing her to maintain personal autonomy within traditional family structures. Her presence contributed to household stability during the challenging decades of the mid-20th century. Princess Irma Helene's adult life was largely private, without significant public responsibilities or professional employment. This pattern was common among unmarried aristocratic women of her generation, who often found themselves in positions that offered comfort and security, but limited opportunities for independent achievement or public recognition. Her existence was circumscribed but not uncomfortable. The princess lived through World War II at Langenburg, experiencing the challenges and restrictions that affected all German families during this period. Her family's strategy of discretion and adaptation allowed them to survive the Nazi era without serious compromise or persecution, while her unmarried status may have provided some protection from the more complex political pressures that affected married members of aristocratic families. Princess Irma Helene's later years coincided with the remarkable transformation of Germany from wartime devastation to democratic prosperity during the Federal Republic's early decades. Her long life allowed her to witness the complete evolution of German society from imperial privilege through totalitarian rule to democratic reconstruction, providing a unique perspective on 20th century European history. The princess maintained connections with aristocratic relatives across Europe while adapting to the reduced circumstances and changed social environment that characterized post-war noble life. Her correspondence and social activities helped preserve family traditions and international relationships while acknowledging the fundamental changes that had occurred in aristocratic society. Princess Irma Helene's survival into the 1980s made her a witness to developments that would have seemed impossible during her youth. German reunification, European integration, and the complete transformation of the political and social order that had shaped her early life. Her longevity provided a living link between the aristocratic past and the democratic present. The princess's later years demonstrated the successful adaptation strategies employed by aristocratic families during the 20th century. Her life illustrated how traditional social structures could be preserved through flexibility and discretion while accommodating fundamental political change. Her example influenced other noble families seeking to maintain their heritage while contributing to contemporary society. Princess Irma Helene died in 1986 at the remarkable age of 84, having outlived most members of her generation and witnessed the complete transformation of European aristocratic society. Her death occurred during the final years of the Cold War, when Germany remained divided, but the Federal Republic had achieved stability and prosperity that contrasted dramatically with the uncertainty that had characterized much of her adult life. The princess's death marked the end of a life that had spanned nearly the entire 20th century, from imperial confidence through world wars, revolution, totalitarian rule, and democratic reconstruction. Her longevity made her one of the last direct witnesses to the aristocratic world that had existed before World War I, providing a human connection to a vanished social order. Princess Irma Helene's legacy lay primarily in her contribution to family continuity and the preservation of aristocratic traditions during a period of unprecedented change. Her presence helped maintain the Hohenlohe-Langenburg household through challenging decades while demonstrating the possibilities for aristocratic adaptation to democratic conditions. Her life illustrated both the constraints and the opportunities available to unmarried aristocratic women during the 20th century. The princess's example influenced understanding of how European nobility survived the transition from political privilege to cultural preservation. Her choice of spinsterhood over unsatisfactory marriage prospects, combined with her successful adaptation to changing circumstances, demonstrated alternative paths for aristocratic women beyond the traditional patterns of dynastic marriage and domestic subordination. Prince Alfred of Hohenlohe-Langenburg was born on 16th of April 1911 at Langenburg Castle, the fifth and final child of Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha and Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. His birth occurred during a period of growing political tension in Europe, just 3 years before the outbreak of World War I would fundamentally transform the context for aristocratic life across the continent. The infant prince's birth represented both hope and concern for the Hohenlohe-Langenburg family. After 4 children, his arrival provided additional security for the family succession while creating questions about the resources required to support another member of the household. His birth occurred during a period when aristocratic families were beginning to face economic pressures that would intensify dramatically during the coming decades. Prince Alfred received a name that honored British royal connections through the Saxe Coburg lineage, specifically referencing Queen Victoria's second son, Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, who had married into the Coburg family. This naming pattern demonstrated the continued importance of international royal relationships for mediatized German houses, even as political developments were undermining the stability of these connections. Prince Alfred died on 18th of April 1911, just 2 days after his birth. The infant's death reflected the continued vulnerability of children to medical complications during the early 20th century, when even aristocratic families with access to the best available medical care could not prevent many childhood fatalities that would be easily treatable by later standards. The circumstances surrounding Prince Alfred's death were not extensively documented, reflecting both the private nature of infant mortality within aristocratic families and the limited medical understanding available in 1911. The family's grief was undoubtedly profound, but such losses were sufficiently common during this period that they were often regarded as tragic but not unexpected elements of family life. The infant prince's death occurred during the optimistic final years of the German Empire, when aristocratic families maintained confidence about their future despite growing political tensions. His brief life coincided with the last period when traditional aristocratic assumptions about political stability and social continuity appeared secure, making his death particularly poignant in retrospect. The loss of Prince Alfred created no immediate succession crisis for the family, since his older brother Gottfried remained the clear heir to the family titles and estates. However, The infant's death eliminated potential backup for the family line and reduced the family's options for dynastic marriages and political connections. These considerations were typical concerns for aristocratic families planning for uncertain futures. Prince Alfred's brief existence is recorded primarily through vital statistics and genealogical documentation rather than personal papers or family correspondence. His inclusion in family records demonstrates the careful attention that aristocratic houses paid to documenting all births and deaths, regardless of duration, as part of maintaining accurate succession records in family history. The infant prince's death represents one of many similar losses that affected European aristocratic families during the early 20th century, when infant mortality remained high despite improvements in medical knowledge and practice. His experience was typical rather than exceptional, illustrating the demographic realities that influenced family planning and succession strategies among noble houses. Prince Alfred's place in Hohenlohe-Langenburg family history serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the uncertainty that characterized even privileged families during this period. His brief existence occurred during what would prove to be the final years of the aristocratic world into which he was born, making his early death symbolic of broader patterns of loss and disruption that would affect European nobility. The documentation of Prince Alfred's life and death contributes to the complete historical record of Princess Alexandra's children, fulfilling the genealogical obligations that aristocratic families maintained, regardless of individual circumstances. His inclusion in family records demonstrates the continued importance of comprehensive documentation for houses that defined their identity through historical continuity and succession. The lives of Princess Alexandra of Saxe Coburg and Gotha's children illustrate the transformation of European aristocracy during the 20th century. From Prince Gottfried's successful adaptation to democratic leadership through Princess Irma Helene's long witness to political change, each life demonstrated different strategies for maintaining aristocratic identity while accommodating fundamental shifts in political and social circumstances. Their collective experience spans the complete evolution of German noble life from imperial privilege through democratic citizenship. Prince Gottfried's career in public administration, Princess Marie Melita's dynastic marriage, and the unmarried sisters' private lives represent the range of options available to aristocratic families during this transitional period. Even Prince Alfred's brief existence contributes to understanding the demographic and medical realities that shaped aristocratic family planning. The family's survival and adaptation demonstrate both the possibilities and limitations of aristocratic persistence in the modern era. Their success in maintaining family traditions while contributing to contemporary society provides a model for understanding how European nobility transformed itself from a governing elite to a cultural institution. The complete accounting of their lives reveals the human dimensions of historical change that affected millions across Europe during the 20th century's dramatic political transformations.